And what I mean by that is it it was the desire to want to stay acting like a kid as long as I could as an adult. And to the other way you could put it is to try to push off the responsibilities, to push off future planning, living in the moment, positive vibes only, that type of energy. And uh, it was thinking like the trap was thinking I can, you know, work less. I push that a lot. I could work less, have more freedom, and it will be easy. When you get into it as a digital nomad, you realize just actually how much work it really does take. And at the time, I did not master self control when I was starting off in digital nomad, and so there was a lot of pain along the way. But where it all started, and for so many others, where it starts is the book, The 4 Hour Work Week, that was written by Tim Ferriss. And I don't know Tim personally, and my hope is he had good intentions with this book. But this is where we have to start because it has, as I've gone more into this with yesterday's show talking about how small business owners don't. A majority of them are leasing rather than owning the building that their business is in. Uh, this has also continued to fuel for digital nomads. Digital nomads mostly they rent, and so this has continued to fuel the renter society. And so I want to get into it more, setting the stage for you about digital nomads. The digital nomad, you can think about it as an industry in itself, but as a lifestyle is another way to think about it, or even those would be my two. I would say culture comes up as one. Some would argue that, but I think the one that I relate to the most is the lifestyle. That's what got me really excited to want to move forward into this style of travel and living as a digital nomad, was a lifestyle that was presented for what you could get or what you could expect from this. But it does come with a lot of hard work, and there is also a lot of results that have come up that we can now draw to some connection points of some of the big issues we're dealing with currently today. And I want to dive more into this. There's going to be future shows about this, but let's set the stage for today. Welcome back to the show. Excited to go live. Happy early Thanksgiving. Tomorrow, I won't be going live for Thanksgiving, spending time with family. But happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for your support with this movement. I'm going to get the chat here up. All right. There we go. Yeah, and I think it's important to set the stage here for how I started reading this book, 4 Hour Work Week, how then I moved into wanting to go to be, you think of the identity, be a digital nomad, have that lifestyle. So I was living after college, went to college Charleston in South Carolina, was there for 10 years, had the event that I had hosted, first time ever for creating an in-person conference called SmagCon. 500 people came together. I've said the story before, but I lied a lot leading up to that event, and lied to my team, lied to the community, all to save my reputation, is how I thought about it. Save my reputation, did not feel embarrassed to try to make this event happen. There was a big goal of having 3,000 people come together. And when it was getting closer to that event date and it wasn't happening, I lied about how many people were attending the event in order to create momentum and excitement, which it did. But then there is that sinking feeling that you feel in your gut, knowing that you are lying, and it eats away. I believe it eats away at your soul. And it was a moment after the event happened where externally it seemed like a big success, but internally I had carried this burden of lying. And then finally I told the truth. I had collected a lot of debt, and I was in a really tough place, both financially and emotionally, through this process, where then you had, right, a little later down that, that was back in 2018. Then you have COVID that happens in 2020. And I had felt like I was getting some momentum of getting solid foot, like solid, feeling like I'm on solid ground. But then pandemic hits with COVID, and you know how the for me that was a wake up call of getting literally, you could say, like, get the wool off of your eyes. How much lying was happening around this pandemic, seeing this in mainstream media, that really woke me up, and it showed for me. the evilness that does exist in our world. And I know that can be hard to hear as a small business owner. You want to focus on your small world and you want to be like, evil doesn't exist. But even think about your industry. There are those that try to take advantage of other people. And I know you truly care about the people that you're serving through your products and services, but we also cannot ignore the reality that there is evil out there in this world. And the focus is to be able to move forward and fight for being able to fight for what was beautiful, good, and true in this country here in the U.S. and in this world. And so again, it's important to acknowledge that that's there though, and I know it can be hard to recognize that. But that really woke me up, and I actually had to move back in with my parents. Financially, I couldn't take care of myself. Emotionally, I was in a really tough place, and I was grateful for that. But that's where then I became, I was looking for something. I was looking for outlets. When you get into that position of moving back in with your parents, I'm really grateful for now the relationship I have, but I had to go through a lot of pain to get to the point where I have this relationship I do have now that I'm grateful for with my parents, both my mom and my dad. But at the time, that's where 4 Hour Work Week was introduced to me. Reading that book, I felt this, I felt this excitement of possibilities with this book. And what it did for me that I'm really grateful for was started me down this journey of understanding the importance of organization. But I didn't have the skill of self control mastered in order to put in the work that's required if you want to create a lifestyle like this. And then now that I get more into it, and I'm setting the stage for you today, the more I get into it, the more I see that this isn't the lifestyle that I see myself wanting moving forward in for the rest of my life. And then I see that there's been a lot of pain for others that have experienced this lifestyle. And I think it's important to have a conversation about this because currently today, 1 in 10 US workers is a digital, like 1 in 10 US workers is a digital nomad. And this is growing. There's been a 147% growth since 2019. And a big contributor to this was COVID and what happened with and I'm going to get into it for the shocking data about this, but how many now visas, digital nomad visa programs there are pre COVID and then post COVID. And for me, I'm having to ask a question here where it doesn't, for me, this is where it's to be curious, ask questions, and get into more of like, well, why is that? Why was there such a big increase recently in the last few years? What is happening? And how does this connect to some bigger national conversations? So let's get into the digital nomad lifestyle first with that. So how it can be shared to you, and you may see this online for people posting about it, but it's this idea of you can play central. You have this freedom that you can it's a freedom, it's money, it's adventure, there's like sex appeal with this. But how it comes back to is that well, where do I want to start with this? I think it's kind of like play central is how you think about it. You can there's less future planning. That's a big one. Less future planning, like for kids and marriage. You're not really thinking about that. You're thinking about living in the moment is one that comes up. And this idea of like the freedom that you can, that, you're chasing, that's the big one is this freedom that you're chasing. 9 to 5, normal office job feels like a prison. And the other one that comes up is like, work from anywhere, travel the world, live on a beach with your laptop. And then it's like, well, making you the same or more money that you do now. And so those are some things you can think about with digital nomad. And if you are a digital nomad or you've experienced a lifestyle, I definitely want to hear about or read about your experiences. So please share that because I want to know what it's like for you. What came up for me is there is a lot of isolation and there's a lot of short-term commitment rather than long-term thinking. And you think about the challenges we're facing here in the U.S., like home ownership and equity, and caring about the country that you live in, recognizing the rights that you do have here in this country and the freedoms that you have, like the freedom of speech, and being able to preserve these freedoms is so important. And there are evil forces that are coming in. Think of Marxists to globalists that are moving towards a pressure on these freedoms that we have as individuals. And I think about this freedom that we have of deciding how we make a living, which includes you owning your small business, and how with uh, socialism as the appetizer to communism as a main meal, moving towards the roads where they lead is the abolish of private property. And that's something I don't want to see happen here in this country. And small business owners need to wake up to what's going on here on national level for the conversations. So there isn't that future planning. So you think about kids and you think about marriage and the difficulties we have right now around dating, and how difficult it can be to have a long-term relationship while you are traveling as a digital nomad, while you have this lifestyle of digital nomad. And what it is, because I don't think I've taught about it for those that don't know what it is. It's like you're traveling to different places for a short amount of time. So you can think about it as like a few months at a time, or you're traveling to different countries, and it could be for longer, for a year or 2 years. You're traveling to a different country, let's say in Europe or in Asia. The image you can think about is like go to a Bali villa with an infinity pool. You get the sunset view, and that is what you can see with marketing. Oh, be a digital nomad, work from anywhere. And then it's like buy this course for drop shipping, so you can figure out how to build your wealth that way. So with the freedom that keeps coming up, but then really at the heart of what could be the feeling is the freedom that you've chased was actually an escape from the fact that you've never built anything, and you've never built anything that you couldn't walk away from in 30 days. It's that idea of like just short-term commitments rather than long-term commitments. And when that happens, uh, when you don't feel like when you feel like a visitor rather than truly a local or someone that is going to be living here for the long term, you can care less about the place that you're living in. Care less about what's going on around you, for if it's uh, in government involvement, if that is the community, what's happening in the community. There can be less care for that because you're just going to be here for a little while and then you're going to move on. And that is something that can create isolation for a feeling. It can be difficult then for you to build a strong uh, sense of security in the place that you're living in for traveling, and especially for security in the long term, because you haven't yet had the time to figure out for the future, like what am I going to do when I grow up? And you might be 35 or even 40 and being like, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. I still feel like it's this idea of like still haven't grown up yet. And what that can then cause is issues for marriage, issues down the line for kids. And that is something that can start to tear at the foundations of, even here in the US, tear the foundations of our country. And we've seen that where I think Gen Z being the most indebted generation for their age in history. And then we look at the national debt of over $38 trillion in debt here in the US. And so there are a lot of challenges. And what we got to come back to is then what are the change, what can be changes that we can make? And this is where it connects back to the home ownership, figuring out ways of increasing supply. It goes back to how can we continue to get rid of unnecessary regulations in different industries so that it makes it easier for competition to exist, and then for Americans to start small businesses. And we got to get back to local for not only the business themselves and potentially physical locations. And I talked about that, of how to go from leasing your building to owning your building, and the opportunity that we have ahead of us in this next decade, to then local for the supply chain, localizing that. Because I think of like the 4-hour work week, it's like talking about how to create you're creating this freedom, and then at the same time, it's like you're outsourcing labor to overseas, cheap labor from overseas. You're outsourcing that, uh, and it goes back to like, how is that then supporting Americans here in this country? And you look at our cities and towns, and a lot of them are falling apart. And you start to connect these dots here, and we got to come back to um, recognizing the importance of self control, and the importance of understanding that we got to think long term, generationally, not just in our short term of pleasure and play. And I know how enticing that is. Like I got sucked into that, of like, oh, this would be amazing. This would be so cool. I could just play forever. But I've said it before. We small business owners have to wake up to the national conversation because it's eventually going to find you. It will. You can escape for only so long. And we are coming to a point where there's a lot of urgency here of things that have to change. And we take for granted a lot of the rights that we have here in this country. One, to be able to travel to other countries first. I think of the Schengen 90 days to travel, in Europe, around Europe, to the rights that we have of freedom of speech in this country, and the rights, the freedom that we have of deciding how we make a living, including starting a small business and being able to travel around. So the amount of and I think about it, you can ask yourself this: when was the last time you read the Declaration of Independence? Like when it was the last time you actually understood what are your rights as a citizen? Because when you are a visitor in another country, and let me go to the numbers here. So pre-COVID, there was 3 digital nomad visa programs: Netherlands, Estonia, Portugal. Then post-COVID, there are over 60 countries with digital nomad visa programs. But most of those programs don't lead to residency time of naturalization. So this doesn't work towards a path of citizenship, for most of these. And so then you become a country of visitors. You can't vote in the national or local elections. And then your visa can be revoked at any time. So it goes back to the individual freedoms that we have as citizens, is then, well, at any time your visa can be revoked. So then, you're going to have to leave the country. So it's important to ask these questions more of like, how does this benefit us moving forward? Do we need to change certain things about how we are working? Because as I said, there's 147% growth since 2019 for US workers to be digital nomads. And it's a conversation that needs to be had more because, again, majority of digital nomads are renting. So it continues to fuel the renter economy. And then I go back to the amount of debt that is out there. Think of student loans, credit cards, BNPL, that are being used for basic needs for Gen Z to just meet their basic needs. Think of the um, I said it before. I mean, I'm gonna. It's like I sound like just a repeating record here, but the U.S. The country's debt of being over $38 trillion for the government, we're in rough shape. And so now it looks like, what are the ways that we can again improve and move forward? And I've shared a few of those with you already, but this is one that we have to have more conversations of: how do we get here? How did this happen? And then how can we make shifts and changes moving forward? Because local keeps coming up for me, of going back to supporting local communities. When you are going to another country, it's being able to connect to the culture, understanding the culture, and if it's instead of just being a visitor. And again, there's a difference between visiting the country as a tourist and then actually trying to work there and spend a lot of time there. There's a difference there, and that has to be talked about more. Because when I go to travel to Italy, I want to know Italian culture. I want to see that. When I go to I'm trying to think of another spot like Scotland, I want to be able to feel and or see Scottish culture and like understand. Same with American culture. I think of this country being built on meritocracy, and where you can start off with nothing and then have the American dream. And one of those parts of the American dream is home ownership, to have equity in this country. And that is really difficult right now for a lot of Americans. And so I've said it, we have a lot of work ahead of us. This is a determined movement, and we've got a lot of changes we've got to make. And there is this urgency now to make those changes, because I go back to economic disorder can lead to political radicalism. And that's where, when people get really desperate, they're going to look for radical ideas. And as small business owners, and then if you're a supporter of small businesses and not a small business owner, we have a powerful voice if we unite together. I think there's 33 million small businesses that employ 45% of the private workforce. That's a big impact. And we got to continue to move forward in making it easier for more Americans to start small businesses, to bring support on when it comes to the incentives of the economy, bringing back to small businesses, because small businesses are the heart of the economy, and we can't forget that. So there's a few different areas I'm going to go down in this for future shows relating to digital nomads. One of them is going back to the impact that this has had over the decades, specifically for people that have been in the lifestyle. What's the impact been like? So if you have experienced the lifestyle of a digital nomad, what's that experience been like for you? If you're out of it now, you're not doing it anymore. I'm curious why. Curious why that happened for you, what you felt. Because for me, what I keep coming back to is like this security of being in a place for a long period of time, and that familiarity, the comfort that can come with that. And there's a lot of beauty in that, of wanting to take care of the community that you're part of, that you're living in, and to really care even more about the country that you live in too. Because I do love this country, and I do hope that you love this country too. But there's a lot of work that we have ahead of us in order to make really important changes, so that we can continue to move forward and be a beacon of the West. So thank you for your support again with this movement. Happy early Thanksgiving. And then I'm going to see you on Friday.